Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, December 6th, 2025, and today we're going to be talking about the state of Virginia and a redistricting effort out of the Virginia State House, now with the Democratic leader on the House side, not just the Senate side, but on both sides, House and Senate, Democrats control both chambers, as well as the governorship, as Abigail Spanberger will be sworn in January of 2026. The Virginia Democrats are becoming more clear-cut and ambitious in their potential map redraw for the 2026 midterm elections. Now, if you haven't been tracking, in the state of Virginia, the Democratic Party used their slim legislative majority in the House of Delegates to pass forth through an effort to put to a vote this upcoming March or April by voters in Virginia that could approve a new congressional map in the middle of the decade. Now, in Virginia, the state constitution demands that you must pass a citizens-led referendum through the legislature to get to a vote, not citizens-led, but a citizens-voted-on referendum that must be passed through the legislature 2 times, once before an election and once after, and then it can actually go to a vote. Because of some provision, I believe it was a special session left open by the governor, Glenn Youngkin, the Democrats took advantage of that, and then 2 weeks before the 2025 election, knowing they were about to win nearly every single race, it was up in the air about the Attorney General's race, but for the most part, it was quite solid. All of them voted on the Democratic side to pass forth a decision that would allow voters in Virginia to decide if they wanted a new congressional map. Now, for context, Virginia is a Democratic state. Republicans have not won it on the presidential level since 2004 and have very rarely won it on the statewide level, barring exceptions in 2009 and 2021. And looking at what we've seen, the Democratic Party, knowing they were about to be ushered in an even more expansive legislative majority, took advantage of that. They passed it, they won the election, and they're passing it again in January once all of them are sworn in again, and a vote will come forth in March or April. But after the most recent news in the state of Texas, the Supreme Court made an announcement that they were going to allow Texas to utilize their brand new congressional map that gave Republicans about 5 seats across the state. Now, that's a great sign for the Democrats in California. Both maps are probably going to be upheld. Even in their majority opinion, they cited Proposition 50 on the California Democratic side, saying that that was an equally, a good example of a partisan gerrymander that had nothing to do with race. So the DOJ and Trump's lawsuit is probably going to fall flat on its face simply because the Supreme Court is going to use that same logic that they've used for Texas. They'll likely cancel each other out. But the Democratic Party is looking for an opportunity to push back against what they're seeing in Missouri, in North Carolina. Florida just made the announcement that they're going to do a redraw as well. And so Virginia has the opportunity. And so it has always been a question. Now the Democrats have, control of the chamber. They have their most expansive majority since 1987, 64 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates side, just 3 seats shy of a supermajority, but they just need a majority in order to get this to the ballot box voted on by the, is this the Texas flag behind the Republican here? Anyway, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a big American flag. It's definitely not the Texas flag. I was catching my eye for a second because I just saw one stripe of red and white, but that wouldn't make any sense. But getting back to the point here about what we're talking about, Democrats have the most expansive majority. They were just ushered in on a mandate, won every single statewide race, including the Attorney General's race, and all of the Democrats across the board outperformed Kamala Harris in every single House district and every single statewide election. It was a massive repudiation of Donald Trump and the Republican Party on a very broad level. And so now there is that question being asked. How far do they go in their new map? Now, the House of Delegates has largely been silent on what map they wanted to see put forth. But on the state Senate side, we've known that in leadership, we're going to have to scroll a bit because there's so many candidates here. But the Virginia House of Delegates, if we can actually get to it, I guess we're looking at 2025 elections, but in 2027, the Virginia State Senate is really what I'm trying to get to. The point is that on the Democratic side, you have Senator Louise Lucas, who largely represents a lot of the Democrats here. She is the president pro tempore. She's been serving in this position for quite some time, but she herself has been subject to Republican gerrymandering in the state of Virginia. And so she was essentially drawn out of a competitive district that she was going to run for Congress, and Republicans made it a safe red district instead of a toss-up. And so 20 years ago, she faced that as her reality, that a Republican-controlled legislature and governor decided that they wanted to make a partisan map and in favor of the GOP by quite a significant degree. So Now, 20 years later, she has the opportunity to do the exact same to the Republican Party on behalf of the Democrats. But like I said, the Virginia House of Delegates, we didn't really know exactly where they landed until recently, with the Democratic leader in the Virginia House of Delegates now making the announcement that Democrats should be considering and should be pursuing a 10-to-1 map in Virginia on the congressional level. Now, if you don't know where Virginia currently stands in terms of partisan composition, it's actually quite balanced. And I don't say that to mean that it's fair. I do think this map probably should be a little bit more in favor of the Democratic Party, given that if you were to shift this map by roughly 5 points, Republicans would win 7 out of the 11 seats here and a majority of 7-4, despite Kamala Harris still being able to win the state with a 5-point shift to the right. And so I do think that, on face value, Virginia's map here is not the fairest, but it certainly is balanced. It's a 6-1, a 6-5 advantage in favor of the Democrats. But what the Democratic Party is now looking to do, as states like Missouri and North Carolina and pending Indiana on Monday are looking to make the decision on, which is that redrawing their maps could usher in the additional 4 or 5 seats that Republicans were expecting out of Texas. Virginia is looking for a reaction point. How do they push back against the Republican Party? And a 10-1 map would be the most extreme gerrymander that they have pursued in Virginia on the Democratic side in a very, very long time. And looking at what it would likely look like, the maps that have been proposed thus far have axed out immediately any of the toss-up or swing Republican districts. They lock down and solidify the Democratic districts in Northern Virginia, and they draw out pockets to ensure that Republican representation in these 2 districts is diminished, and they're compact down to just 1. And as it would look on the national level, well, there'd be a lot more blue on this side of the aisle, but looking at it so far, barring no changes on the congressional level from 2024, Democrats, had they done that in Virginia, would have been able to win the House majority on that move alone. But obviously, Republicans are making their moves too, right? They have their 5 seats in Texas, so I'm going to go ahead and move those over, assuming that they win them all. That's actually quite up in the air. That was the topic of a video recently. Democrats obviously counteracted by taking 5 seats out in California, so that state looks a lot bluer. And then Missouri decided to draw a Republican map here on the 5th district. They took away the 1st district in North Carolina. And so Republicans are probably, it's a bit of a toss-up in Ohio, but they seemingly have drawn out an additional Democratic district in that state. And so this is roughly where we stand right now. It's about 219 to 216. Democrats on the net have actually gained 1 seat so far. That's where Florida comes in, looking to do their redraw as well. They're looking to axe maybe 3 or 4 Democratic seats here. If that was to happen, the math would look more like this. And then you would start to see the exact reason why Democrats are counteracting in Virginia. Because if Virginia was to, let's say, give those seats back to the GOP, Republicans would be at 227 to 208 rather than, an even closer margin, right? 227 to 208 would be a significant improvement on the 5-seat majority they have now. This would be a 19-seat advantage. That's how quick the House math goes. And Democrats would be fighting for more seats to get to that House majority, right? And when you look at it, if you were just to shift the map this way, by 1 or 2 points, that would usher in Democrats in the majority under the current map from 2024. But under this new Republican map, you would not find it to be the case. And so Democrats are looking to Virginia as this opportunity to level the playing field. Republicans will still probably come out with the upper hand when it comes down to congressional redraws, especially with the Supreme Court now implementing that map in the state of Texas. But seriously speaking, Republicans, are at this point where they are doing this because they know that 2026 is going to go awry, and so they are scrambling in every single state that they can. They're still trying to keep up the pressure in Nebraska and Kansas. Chances are those states won't budge, but they're running out of places to do it, and so their entirety of this redraw efforts is hinging on what happens with Section 2 of the VRA with the United States Supreme Court. If they make the decision to gut the VRA, every single district in the South will be gone for Democrats. I kid you not. Even in Florida, you could end up with a map that is, 28-0 in favor of the GOP. Georgia would draw them out. South Carolina has already introduced a bill to draw them out. Mississippi would immediately. Alabama has been pleading to. Louisiana desperately wants to. Across the board here, you would be working with a number of congressional districts evaporating from the Democratic side. Now, it does give Democrats the agency and the ability to draw, other states even more excessively in favor of their party. But Republicans would come out on the net, and it would not necessarily be an immediate enough to save them in 2026, but it certainly could. And so that's why Republicans are trying to do everything they can, because if the Supreme Court does not deliver on Section 2, there's a very real reality that it is only through these mechanisms that they are able to do it. And so the Virginia Democrats are just not going to let it go by. I think that the Democratic Party of 2016 and 2017 of taking the high road as Republicans, and taking the moral high ground as Republicans, lose that trust amongst the voters. Losing that trust amongst the voters has not translated into Democrats winning elections concretely in a multitude of election cycles. Even in 2020, I think the big takeaway that I think Democrats might have lost on that cycle, including in 2022 as well, is that yes, there is a rejection of Donald Trump, but it's not because he jeopardizes the meaning and the foundation of our political institutions and that Republicans do extreme things and therefore, voters are losing their trust and therefore not voting for them because of that. They are not voting for them because in 2020, they were doing extreme things as our global economy and American economy was collapsing. As the nation was plagued quite literally by a plague, you saw the administration acting as if nothing was wrong and voters were angry. And even then, had 44,000 voters voted differently, Donald Trump would have won re-election in 2020. And so thinking about where we are, thinking about 2024, another great example of what I think the lessons in 2022 were largely taken away. Sure, Donald Trump is extreme. That is what a lot of voters believe. And a lot of voters do not like candidates who try to embody Donald Trump because for a lot of voters, they may seem Donald Trump as extreme, but still vote for him because they excuse that behavior. They excuse the way he talks to reporters. They excuse the comments he makes, the posts he does, the actions he takes, but they will not excuse it for every Republican. But looking at what voters are really soured on right now, it's not about a clutching of the pearls moment that says, oh, Donald Trump is redistricting Texas, so therefore my swing vote in Pennsylvania is going blue. It's certainly not that. It is that the economy, yet again, is in total freefall, and Donald Trump's approval on every issue, immigration, foreign policy, the economy, inflation, healthcare, any issue, he's underwater on. And that's why Democrats do so well, why they're able to usher in such expansive majorities in places like the Virginia House of Delegates, and it is on the Democratic Party, who is seeing Republicans in real time absorb seats, take away representation that exists right now for the Democrats, and gives it to the GOP, on them to fight back because there is an appetite for that amongst their party. Their base, Democrats, want Democrats to fight fire with fire. They're tired of these strongly worded letters that amount to absolutely nothing as this administration walks all over them on the national level. And it is Virginia's Democratic Party that is now seeing that they are going to go for the extreme. They are going to go for a 10-1 map that if it gets through, Democrats will be very happy they did because it will single-handedly counteract the results in Missouri, in North Carolina, and then some. And as Democrats have had their, surprising victory in Utah, they are inching their way closer back to where the status quo was. Meaning that Donald Trump and the Republican Party expended all of this political capital, all of this wasted time and countless Oval Office meetings of random state senators that they desperately need to pivot their votes on right before a vote on Monday would be for nothing. And that Donald Trump's effort here to jeopardize the sanctity of our midterm elections by redrawing districts in the middle of the decade because Texas was worried that the 5 seats here that were already going to be, Democrats were going to win them. There's a possibility they win 2 districts still in Texas in 2026, which I think is lost on the GOP as well because their gerrymander was not as strong as it could have been. But again, that's something for them to take up on their own front. But just looking at where we are on the national level, you have 222 to 213 as it stands right now, with the expected gerrymander out of Florida, out of, counting on it in Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina, and California, and more might happen. But a lot might not too. And if Democrats do not push back in the states where they have the authority to do so, where voters can grant them said authority, like in Virginia, they could very well see a lot of negative repercussions on them in 2026 and beyond because of the decisions being made by Donald Trump and the GOP. And so the time to act for the Democrats is now, which is why it is something that it really shows that now in both chambers, where Democrats have governing majorities and have the governor's mansion, the lieutenant governor's office, the attorney general's office to not halt them on a judicial front on these maps. Chances are Virginia's maps will get through and will be implemented. The question is, do they go for 10-1, 9-2, 8-3? If Democrats are going to go as far as they promise they will, Democrats will be very happy that they did, like I said, in years to come, because it will solidify them in districts that they otherwise might not only be competing in, but in districts they never even had a chance in 2026. And now, with a new map, they certainly could, and he could even win the Democratic House majority on the back of states like Virginia. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.